So before we get started, I want to share a quick story. I can't tell you how many food founders I met who are doing everything right on the surface. They have a great product, customers love it, sales are coming in, but behind the scenes, they're stuck. They're not sure if their recipe will actually scale. They don't know if their cost will hold once volume increases. They're wondering if retail is the next step or if they're moving too soon could hurt their business. And almost every time, the problem isn't effort or passion. It's that they don't have the clarity on where they are in the scaling journey. That's exactly why I created the Scale Up in Retail Readiness quiz. If you're not sure whether your food product is truly ready to scale, I've created the Scale Up in Retail Readiness quiz to help you get clarity. In just 3 minutes, you'll see where you stand and what to focus on next to grow your food business the right way. You can take the quiz through the link in the show notes. So let's dive into the episode today.
All right, everybody. So we're at the mid-year mark, 6 months down, 6 to go. And if you're building a food product business, this is the moment things stop being theoretical. So today, I want to give you an honest, behind-the-scenes look at where we are. Not a highlight reel, not an everything amazing update. I'm talking about the actual mechanics of getting a food product to market. So the launches we're pointing at for September and October, the co-manufacturer decision we're finally closing in on, and how we're thinking about getting into more local stores right now, and the big arc, like what we're building towards for a full retail launch next year. Like this is what we're talking about. So if you're running a food product business, better for you. I'm thinking about starting one. This episode is basically a field report. So let's get into it. Why mid-year is a real planning checkpoint. And so quick thought before I get into the specifics. So most people treat January as a planning month and then December as a wrap-up month. But if you're in food product, physical, perishable, adjustable, or a consumer packaged goods product, mid-year is actually the more important checkpoint. So here is why. By July, you know which Q1 bets paid off and which didn't. You've got real sales data, not predictions, and critically, you still have enough runway left in the year to course correct before the holiday season and before next year's planning cycle locks in. So this episode is structured around 4 things I'm personally tracking right now. Number 1 is what's launching in September and October. The second one is where are we on the co-manufacturer decision. And then the third one is how we're expanding into local retail distribution. And then the fourth one is, and the longer game, so prepping for a broader retail launch next year. Let's get them one at a time, and we'll start with the September-October launch window. So first up, fall launch window. So September and October are the sweet spot for a few reasons. You're past the summer slowdown, consumers are back in the buying mindset, and you're early enough ahead of the holiday rush that you're not fighting for shelf space or add inventory with every other brand trying to cram into November. So what does working towards September, October launch actually looks like in practice? So 6 weeks or so out from Labor Day. Production lead time. If you're manufacturing a food product, you would already know your exact turnaround from purchase order to finished packaged products sitting in a warehouse. Anything less than a 6 to 8 week buffer before your target date is cutting it close, especially with ingredient sourcing, the co-packer scheduling, shelf life or batch testing requirements. And then the other one is packaging and compliance logs. So nutrition panels, ingredient list, allergen declaration, certification like organic or non-GMO barcodes, which can take a really long time. Whatever applies to your category, this needs to be finalized well before production because a late change here cascades into everything else. And then marketing assets and pre-launch list building. A fall launch isn't a single day. It's a runway, email list, retailer previews, intel or press seeding, and groundwork ideally starts like 60 to 90 days out. And then the retail or e-commerce readiness. So if you're direct consumer, and if this launch touches any retail partner, systems, POs, the setup, the EDI, setup, the planograms often have their own lead times that are completely outside of your control. Like you can't really do anything about it. So the honest truth is a September, October launch date is really an August deadline in disguise, because everything meaningfully has to be locked by then. So if you're listening to this and your fall launch still has to open questions on production or packaging, that's a flag to chase down this week, not next month. I want to point out something, because if you're at that point, this is actually where you see a lot of brands deciding to push their launch to the next year because they're not meeting a lot of the deadlines. And this is where, if you really evaluate where you are and you see there are gaps and major gaps that you cannot meet in the next month, this is where you just count your losses and say, you know what, let's put our ducks in a row for the next launch. It doesn't mean that you slow down. It just means that you put it down for now, and then you're going to work on it towards the next year. And I've seen this. I'm consulting for a company right now, and with private label, we've had a lot of larger clients, big clients saying, you know what, we're not ready. We don't have our ducks in a row, and we're going to push it to the next year. So this is the point where you decide that. Like it's actually easier for you to do it that way, and you end up saving more money other than waiting until like last minute. So this is one of the points to put into consideration. And then now we go to the second one that we're talking about, narrowing down the co-manufacturer. So second big thread, the co-manufacturer decision. So if you haven't been down this road, a co-manufacturer or co-man is the outside facility that actually produces your product at scale. Once you're past making things yourself or with a small commercial kitchen that you're currently using. So this decision is one of the highest leverage calls you've made all year, because it affects cost, quality, and capacity and how fast you can grow for years, not months. And if you're at this point, you've probably interviewed so many co-manufacturers, and now you're probably down to like your 3 that you want to decide upon. And here's the framework I'm using to narrow down the short list of what you have right now and something to consider. And if you want to pause after every single point and come back and listen to it, you're more than welcome to do that. So the first one is like the minimum order quantities. Can you actually hit the MOQs without tying up cash and inventory you can't move? So a co-man that's a perfect fit on paper is the wrong fit if their minimums blow your cash flow. So this is where you can negotiate with them for them to lower the MOQ. If you really, really like them and you want to work with them and you see a potential, that's where you can negotiate with them for them to lower the MOQ. And then the quality consistent, not just quality. Almost every co-man can show you a great sample batch. The real question is variance, batch to batch, month to month. Ask for references from brands you've been with them at least 2 years. At least they've been with them for 2 years, not just like months. So, and the other thing you can also get to do is like reach out to those co-mans or to those brands that your specific co-brand is manufacturing for, and talk to them and see what's their experience. Like, don't be afraid to ask who they are, just so that you can figure out, or there's a way also you can always find out if they don't divulge, but it's a best thing to do just so that you know what you're getting yourself into. I would really encourage you to do that. Look for other people that can vouch for this specific company, or somebody that can speak to what's actually going on and the experience that they've had with them. And then the other one is capacity to grow with you. Where are they today and where is the ceiling? You don't want to platform to another, like switching to another co-man again in 12 months because you've outgrown them. But there's also the piece where if you're comfortable doing that just because of where your business is now, that's totally fine, because you can always be doing this communication with the other co-man that you're going to switch to if this is your midpoint, parallel for you to be able to do that. But most of the time, it makes more business sense for you to stick with one and grow with that. So that's the point where I was talking about, like you can negotiate with them the minimum order quantities if you're seeing potential in growth and you know how your brand is supposed to be growing or what the growth that you see, the potential that you see. So that's where this can come into play. And then communication and transparency, always about communication. So how fast do they respond? Will they flag a problem before it becomes your problem? Or will you find out when a shipment doesn't show up? there needs to be very, very, very open communications between you and your co-man, and having that open relationship where they can be very frank with you and transparent with you and tell you what's going on, so you know what's going on and how. Because at the end of the day, you know what? They're the ones producing your product, but who's the customer going to call? It's your brand. So your customer is going to call you because they want something wrong with your product. So they will not be contacting the co-man. So you want to be at a point where you're very comfortable with your co-man and you're comfortable with the product that is coming out from that facility and you can rely on as a brand and you're happy with. And then the other thing is geographic and logistics fit. So where are they located changes your freight cost and your lead times in a very real, ongoing way, not just for this launch, but every reorder after that. So this is where you need to really look at where they are located. If you're having customers in opposite sides, maybe finding one that is midway so it's easier for distribution is another. Or if you do your research and you find that your product is being bought in the West Coast compared to the East Coast, then it makes sense for you to find a co-man that is closer to your market. But then there's also instances, and I've spoken to founders that do that, where you can maybe start with one, and then if the other part starts to grow, there's nothing wrong with having two co-mans. Like I know brands that are doing really well that have two co-mans and they have them based on regions. Just so the two regions, like if you're very so far away, like example is like Canada, for example, if you have a very higher market like in Halifax area and you have Vancouver, the transportation can take a lot of money. So it's better to just have on both sides, and brands do that. So, but you need to evaluate like the logistics piece and how that's going to play a part, especially in your brand. So we're currently down to a short list, running side by side samples and reference calls in parallel rather than sequentially, because sequential vetting is one of the most common ways this decision quietly eats a whole quarter. So you want to be doing them at the same time. So the goal is to have this locked well before the fall launch goes into full production, because this partner is just producing this run, the foundation of next year's retail scale up too. So that's what you need to keep in mind. And then I'm also reminding you at that point, if you're still looking at the launch, you've either done your plan trial or you're planning to do a plan trial like ASAP, like as soon as possible. And I would invite you to go listen to the podcast on plan trial, because that will help you if you haven't done that already. And then the other one now is growing local retail distribution. So this is another thing that you have. So that's the third piece, channel distribution, specifically getting into more local independent stores, because this is where you can grow really well and you can rack up a lot of the margins, keep them to yourself. So this is a part of the strategy that is less glamorous than a big retail launch, but honestly might matter more right now. Here's why local distribution earns its place in the plan, because these are now the real reason, because it's real world validation. A local store buyer says yes, and then reordering is a much stronger signal than social media engagement. It tells you that the product sells to strangers, not just your existing audience, right? So that's a really good gauge of what's going on. And you can also use this data that you're getting from your local stores and you can share them with the retailers that you're eyeing for the next fiscal year. So it builds your case for bigger retail. That's exactly what I just mentioned, because when you eventually walk into conversation with regional or national retail buyers who are in like 40 independent stores and reordering at this rate, is a concrete credibility data point. It proves of you're selling through, not just pitch decks. You're not just pitch decking your retail or your potential retail. And then it's a lower risk way to stress test operations, because smaller orders from local accounts let you find the cracks in your fulfillment and packaging and reorder process before you're doing it on a national scale. So where mistakes are far more expensive, because these ones are more controlled. And there's also the point where if it's a local, you can always walk in and figure out what's going on and just have that discussion. So what we're actually doing on this front is you're mapping our target stores by region. So independent, specialty stores, co-ops, whatever is the right fit for this category. And then you're building a sample. So repeatable pitch and line sheet, so outreach doesn't reinvent itself every time. And this is where you can do, like if let's say you're in a local, these are like regionalized stores and you're in a local one and you've already reached out to one of yours the one in the local one, and they've said, yeah, so this is now the point where you can now reach out and get the other ones too. So you're in them, like let's say if it's a Whole Foods, but maybe not a Whole Food, like if it's a natural food store that is in your area, but they have different, like maybe 5 or 6 in the region, and you're in already one, the one that is in your region, in your town or in your city, then you can also now reach out to be in the other one. So that's what you're doing at this point. You're prioritizing that, and you're prioritizing stores with engaged local following over pure foot traffic, since that audience overlap compounds. And this is good because when you have a local store, you can always send people to like a physical store. It's very good because then you can always have data from that specific store. I have a founder that was telling me it's actually a local store. It's a shroom soda if you haven't tried it. And they have like this baby store that they have their product in. And she was actually telling me that they sell a lot more product in that specific store. And it's more like word of mouth. And then the founder there, the owner of the store, like sells it because she buys it wholesale. And it's such a great relationship that you can do. So you can be able to prioritize that. And then you're setting up a lightweight reorder cadence. So we're not manually chasing every account every few weeks. Like you kind of have like a plan of how you're planning that out and how you're reaching out to them, because the mindset here is every local account is a rehearsal for retail conversation we want to have next year, because you can maybe talk to a retailer and then you figure out, okay, maybe that was not the best way to do it, but it's more practice. Like it's easier if you're doing it local, you get that lingo going, and then now you can move to the regional ones and you can now get real retail conversation all underway because you've already done the practice. And then now the other thing is the big picture. So you're building towards next year's retail launch, which brings me to the through line connecting everything I've talked about today. In the fall launch, the co-manufacturer decision, the local store push, and none of these they are not standalone projects. They're all groundwork for a big retail launch we're targeting for next year. So here's how they connect. The co-manufacturer we lock in this year needs to already have the capacity and consistency for a bigger retail run next year, not just this fall's volumes. And that's why I was saying, if you really like them and the MOQ is high, you can negotiate with them because you have the potential to grow. The September-October launch is a life stress test for demand, packaging, and fulfillment before we're doing it at retail scale. And then the local store distribution builds the sell-through data and relationship that makes the retail pitch credible instead of theoretical. So you go through the motion. And so when I zoom out mid-year, it's just checking on 4 separate initiatives. It's making sure those 4 things are actively sequenced correctly so that by the time we're sitting across from big retail buyers next year, we're not asking them to take a bet on us. We're showing them a track record. And the other thing could be too, like you already know the planogram and you already know what you want to get into next year. So now it's just getting ready to be on track and to be able to get into that retail for the next year. So the thing is here, so now if everything I just talked through the co-manufacturer decision, getting retail ready, building the track record buyers actually want to see, if that feels like a lot to piece together on your own, I want to make this easy for you. I'm running a free training called Unlock the Secret to Retail Success with my exclusive ETS method framework. And it's happening July 27th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. So this is where I'm going to walk you through the exact framework I use, the ETS method of getting food product genuinely retail ready, not just we shipped a case to a store and hoped we'll get into how, we'll get into how the pieces I talked about today, the manufacturing, the distribution, and retail positioning actually fit together into one system you can repeat instead of reinventing your approach every time you're chasing a new client. It's free, it's live, and it's an hour. If you're aiming for a retail launch next year, like I am, this is the training to be in the room for. Spots are limited, so grab yours now. I'll drop the link in the show notes. And that's July 27th, 1 to 2 p.m. Unlock the secret to retail success with the ETS method framework. And I'd love to see you there. That's where things stand at the mid-year mark. A fall launch that's really an August deadline or July deadline. a co-manufactured decision we're closing out deliberately instead of rushing, a local retail push that's doing double duty as both revenue and proof, and all of it rolling towards a big retail launch next year. If you're working through something similar, I'd love to hear where you are. What's the piece of your own mid-year plan that feels most uncertain right now? That's usually the thing worth spending the next 2 weeks on. Don't forget, if you want the full framework behind everything I covered today, join me for the free ETS method training that is going to be happening July 27th, 1 to 2 p.m. EST. Link is in the show notes. Thanks for listening. And until next week, keep scaling your food product the right way. And remember, I am rooting for you
to help you get clear on where your business is today and what to focus on next. So thanks for spending the time with me today. Until next week, keep scaling your food business.